The interpretation of Dasein in its everydayness Alltäglichkeit, however, is not identical with describing a primitive stage of Dasein, with which we can become acquainted empirically through the medium of anthropology. Everydayness is not the same as primitiveness. Rather, everydayness is also and precisely a mode of being of Dasein, even when Dasein moves in a highly developed and differentiated culture. On the other hand, primitive Dasein also has its possibilities of non-everyday being, and it has its own specific everydayness. To orient the analysis of Dasein toward the life of primitive peoples can have a positive methodical significance in that primitive phenomena are often less hidden and complicated by extensive self-interpretation on the part of the Dasein in question. Primitive Dasein often speaks out of a more primordial ursprünglichen absorption in phenomena, in the pre-phenomenological sense. The conceptuality, which perhaps appears to be clumsy and crude to us, can be of use positively for a genuine elaboration of the ontological structures of phenomena. But up until now, our information about primitive peoples has been provided by ethnology. And ethnology already moves in certain preliminary concepts and interpretations of human being in general, beginning with the initial collection of its materials, its findings and elaboration. We do not know whether commonplace psychology or even scientific psychology and sociology, which the ethnologist brings with him, offer any scientific guarantee for an adequate possibility of access, interpretation, and mediation of the phenomena to be investigated. The situation here is the same as with the disciplines mentioned before. Ethnology itself already presupposes an adequate analytic of Dasein as its guideline. But since the positive sciences neither can nor should wait for the ontological work of philosophy, the continuation of research will not be accomplished as progress, but rather as the repetition and the ontologically more transparent purification of what has been ontically discovered. Although the formal differentiation of the ontological problematic as opposed to ontic investigation may seem easy, the development, and above all the approach ansatz of an existential analytic of Dasein, is not without difficulty. A need is contained in this task which has made philosophy uneasy for a long time, but philosophy fails again and again in fulfilling the task, working out the idea of a natural concept of world. The wealth of knowledge of the most far-flung and manifold cultures and forms of existence available today seems favorable to taking up this task in a fruitful way. But that is only an illusion. Fundamentally, this plethora of information seduces us into failing to see the real problem. The syncretistic comparison and classification of everything does not of itself give us genuine essential knowledge. Subjecting the manifold to tabulation does not guarantee a real understanding of what has been ordered. The genuine principle of order has its own content which is never found by ordering, but is rather already presupposed in ordering. Thus the explicit idea of world as such is a prerequisite for the order of world images. And if world itself is constitutive of Dasein, the conceptual development of the phenomenon of world requires an insight into the fundamental structures of Dasein. The positive characteristics and negative considerations of this chapter had the goal of leading the understanding of the basic inclinations and kind of questions in the following interpretation onto the correct path. Ontology can only contribute indirectly to the furtherance of existing positivistic discipline. It has a goal of its own, provided that the question of being is the spur for all scientific search over and above the acquisition of information about beings.